Nickelodeon made a documentary. Yeah, Nickelodeon and documentary, two things you never thought would be together in the same sentence. But then again, I mean, you think about how Nick News doesn't pull its punches with its and actually does legitimately try to talk about news in a serious way to children. I mean, yeah, it's logical to think that Mad Hot Ballroom could do the same. And yeah, the fact that Nickelodeon not only did a documentary film, it's actually a really mature and impressive experience. Here's the plot, or rather the description, because this is basically everything you see in this is real. It's not made up. It takes place in New York in the early 2000s, where we learned about how all the public schools, as a requirement, have to have the kids learn how to ballroom dance and then eventually compete in competition after months of training. We follow 3 of the schools specifically, and we meet several of the kids at each school. We meet the instructors and the teachers at the dancing instructors and the teachers at each school. And we see the kids' progress. We see the kids interacting with each other, with the teachers or dance instructors, and then eventually we see them in competition. So, will one of the teams end up coming up on top? Will they find they truly can express themselves through dance? So, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I love this movie. This was a very entertaining experience. And yeah, spoiler alert, not for this movie, but for Nickelodeon Movie Month, the fact that this, a PG-rated documentary film about kids learning how to ballroom dance, is a more mature film than at least one of Nickelodeon's 4 PG-13 rated movies. That's quite a feat to accomplish itself. And yeah, you wonder how much of an involvement Nickelodeon did have with this, considering how mature it is, how much it's... But even then, I mean, they had to treat this maturely. They couldn't beat around the bush. I remember when I first heard about the film, I was relatively the same age as the kids in it, and I remember I got really excited. I also took ballroom dancing as a kid. Granted, at the end of elementary school, granted it was an after-school activity, and it was optional, but at the same time, I still took it, and I enjoyed it, and I got into it. What I take out of this film is the fact that I'm surprised this wasn't... that Nickelodeon heard about what happened here, and rather than actually... heard about what was happening, and rather than actually try to make the movie, they try and make a documentary out of it, they'd actually try to make a movie based off of it. Maybe have more definitive characters. But even then, I think what they would have done would have been nowhere near as good as this. And, you know, while I do want to see a movie about this, at the same time, while I do want to see like an actual fictionalized version of this on film, I'm really impressed with the non-fictional version we got. The one that's true to pretty much what happened. And, you know, you think about the fact that these characters... a lot of these kids, they do kind of blend together, but at the same time, they have distinct personalities. They act like kids. They have thoughts like kids, and that's a very difficult thing to be able to capture on film, to be able to write it on film. So, yeah, you know that this is real, given the fact that the kids can be so definitive with how they're shown. If I have any complaints about the movie, I suppose it's the fact that, well, there are so many kids. They are balancing so much because they focus on 3 schools as opposed to just focusing on one, and it's hard to keep track of. It can be hard to keep track of things for that reason. Like, for example, there's a scene where a kid doesn't like the fact that he's partnered with a girl he doesn't want to dance with, and so then, like, he's not wanting to participate in the lesson, and then he looks like he ends up quitting altogether. We didn't actually get a outright follow-up to that. I mean, granted, I think I see the kid dancing in the competition at the end of the film. I can't say for certain. And another complaint I have is that they maybe make the winner of the winning team of the competition a little too easy to figure out. I mean, granted, you kind of consider two options, but at the same time, you consider the fact that, well, three of they're showing us three different schools. One of these schools is going to be the winner, ultimately. And it's not that far-fetched to assume that one of the schools would also be the runner-up as well. And with that being said, I think that despite those things, they're nitpicks. I mean, because what you get here is a movie that doesn't have the immaturity, not necessarily the immaturity of a child, but the simplistic view of a child and the uncomplicated perspective of a child to the point that it would be at its detriment. Because this movie is effective in the fact that it is certainly being told by adults, but at the same time, you get the adult's perspective as well as the child's perspective. For example, there are 2 references to 9/11 in this movie. 2 references to 9/11 in a Nickelodeon movie? One of which is saying how things were difficult ever since 9/11 happened, and then the other one mentioning how the Twin Towers used to be in New York when a group of the kids and one of the instructors and teachers passes by Ground Zero. And not to mention there's another scene where, well, two boys have a disagreement, and then you're not sure why exactly one of the boys is in trouble until later on you find out that one of the boys said that the other one was acting gay. Really? We're talking about the derogatory use of the word gay in a Nickelodeon movie? But at the same time, it works in the way that it's done in the film. It's effective in the fact that it's not drawing too much attention to it. It's just there. You hear it. You see somebody dealing with it. And then it's not dwelled on after that. It's moved on. And it's not made such a big fuss of. So, yeah, again, for a Nickelodeon movie to be subtle, to be explicit, but at the same time not hammer you on the head with something, it is not something you see often. And the fact that they could do it with this movie, and yes, a documentary, and they pretty much had to do it in order to be able to be respectful to the people it was about and be respectful to the subject matter. I mean, again, I think there's something to really appreciate here for that reason. This is a film that I think despite being a documentary, it's one that should be sought out. That should still impress people, but even despite the fact that it's not a film that somebody wrote, you can't write something like this. And again, also, one of the teams, a little slight spoiler here, one of the 3 teams doesn't end up making it to the finals, and we don't really hear much of them other than that. After that, part of me wishes that they had, after the competition, the filmmakers had gathered the 3 schools together to express to them how much they were impressed with their dancing and congratulating the winner and the runner-up, and having the kids even interact with each other to, really appreciate the experience with each other as opposed to just with their own classmates. I mean, a really striking scene for me in the movie was the scene where it's the finals, and then you have a couple of the dances, one of which is to the way Frank Sinatra's "The Way You Look Tonight," and you hear a mother talking about how proud and impressed she is with her daughter. And I would freaking love, and I really dug the heck out of watching these kids just be kids and learn how to dance. And yeah, again, a PG-rated movie for some thematic elements. It doesn't push the boundaries of that. And yeah, again, the fact that this can stand out as, even without thinking of Nickelodeon movies being rated PG-13, the fact that it stands out as being a mature film with just simply a PG rating in general. It's something to really just mull over and give a lot of thought to, in the fact that they could do that. That a movie can be this real, and yet at the same time not be automatically slapped with an R rating or a PG-13 rating, just be based off of being so entwined in reality that it could end up at the level of a PG movie. I mean, heck, like I said with the kids in this movie, I would love to see a follow-up documentary to this where they would meet up with the kids years later to learn about their lives now, after like this competition and after this movie. I think it is something you could certainly dig out of it. So, it's certainly without a doubt that I say that if this is a film you seek out and you absolutely should, you're going to want to dance like nobody's watching.